Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 867B, and today's date is January 14th, 2016, and the title of the episode is All Military Assets Are in Place. We are just waiting for the spark to push the war agenda. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, the White House came out and they officially admitted that fake vaccination programs have been used by the United States as a cover for covertly stealing DNA samples from the public as part of the so-called war on terror. The aim of the scheme, carried out in the Middle East, was to use DNA analysis to identify suspect terrorists who would then be targeted to be killed by the United States. So the CIA ran a phony vaccination program in Abbottabad, in Pakistan, as a ruse to obtain DNA evidence. And the question is, how do we know that they're not doing it here in the United States or any of the other countries like Africa, where they're saying they're vaccinating children, the public, adults against measles and anything like this? Because they have admitted that they are doing this at this point. And if they're doing this, they're doing it in other places. And this is how it works. The nurses were trained to withdraw some blood in the needle after administering the drug. Now, the White House says they'll no longer use fake vaccination campaigns as a tactic in the war on terror. And the people of the world are supposed to, automatically trust this promise. Well, they also told us that they weren't going to spy on the people anymore. But guess what? They continually do that. So anything this government says, we shouldn't believe. And actually, under the Constitution, there's nothing in the Constitution that says we have to believe the government. Now, out in Oregon, we see that things are starting to heat up. Harney County Fire Marshal Chris Breels, he decided to resign after he discovered undercover FBI agents posing as militia members near the National Wildlife Refuge. And he's saying that he found the FBI agents who were impersonating militia members lurking around the town's armory. When he inquired about the undercover operation with County Judge Steve Grazzi, he was told to back off. And just before he discovered this, there were reports of people who looked like the militia. I think the corporate media was also reporting on this. And they said that these people were harassing the locals, which when you look at the Bundy and the group that he is leading, they're not like that whatsoever. Now, Bundy and his group, they're going through the documents of the BLM, and they're finding out things that the BLM has done, certain acts on purpose to get ranchers off their land. But these FBI agents, which are agent provocateurs who were sent to create some type of an event in this area. And we see right now that many of the members who are standing their ground, they don't want violence. They would not go up to the locals and start harassing it. What would be the purpose of this? No, these agent provocateurs were there to create trouble, to frame the protesters. And we're going to have to watch and continually watch what is going on in this area. I know Pete Santilli is out there reporting on a lot of what's going on there. And we can see that the government is going to do whatever they have to try to create some type of an event. Because they can't negotiate. They can't talk to people. They want an incident. They want this to blow up. And you can see already, this is what they're pushing for. Now, we see that France is going to mobilize 40,000 reservists to boost national security. The current was 28,000. They're increasing it by 12,000 because of all the terrorism that's going on inside the country. And we know they're passing a lot of laws to take away the rights of the people. And we know this is going on in the UK, Australia, Canada, the United States, and many other European countries. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the Ukrainian State Energy Company has agreed to buy about 1.7 billion cubic meters of gas from European suppliers, because right now Russia will not sell the natural gas, so they had to go to a different area to get this gas. And they're purchasing it between $188 and $211 per thousand cubic meters, which is very close to what Russia was offering. But they didn't want to go with Russia. So they filled up their tanks with reverse flows. They waited to a point, and they decided to go with the European suppliers, which are actually getting the gas from Russia. Poroshenko says he wants Europe and the U.S. to help in securing Crimea's return. He said Thursday that he's going to get the southeastern area and Crimea returned to Ukraine. Now, he provided very few details. He said he was going to do this by the end of this year. Now, how is he going to do this? Well, we know what has been going on there. He's also said that he has irrefutable evidence from satellite imagery and video footage captured by our intelligence service showing that the Ukrainian border was crossed by Russia's latest military. He just can't show you any of this right now. But maybe later on. But at this point, he can't show you any of the proof that he has. So you can see what he's doing. We have the cyber attack that brought down the power infrastructure. He's now trying to tell everyone, and of course, he's saying that he has proof because everyone always calls Poroshenko out on his lies. We always call the U.S. out on its lies, or any other country that is trying to lie. So he's trying to convince everyone that he has this proof, but he really doesn't, because if he really did, it'd be plastered all over the place, showing Russia invading Ukraine. Again, more propaganda. Now, we know that the Philippines voted to have the United States come into their country. We see soldiers, the military are going to be bringing in assets, troops into the area. We see the Philippines have already asked the United States to hold joint naval patrols to patrol around the disputed islands of China. Of course, this is going to be used to provoke China, and this is exactly what the United States wants, because they're trying to push a war. Now we see that NATO aircraft may be allowed to patrol Bulgarian airspace. Under the legislation, Bulgaria will be able to choose NATO members for joint air patrol missions. And the country's opposition claims that reforms are a gross violation of Bulgarian constitution and attempt to abolish the republic's air force. So all these military assets and everything that we've been seeing from NATO, the United States, they are doing this on purpose to get everything ready for this upcoming war. It has not stopped. It has not slowed down. All the training, all the drills, all the military assets that have been brought into each one of these countries, guess what happens after the drills? The military assets and the soldiers stay in the countries. And this is all in preparation for what is coming. Now, as we know, NATO and the U.S., they've been moving military personnel and aircraft into nations bordering Russia. They've done so in violation of the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, the CFE, which was negotiated back in 1989 between the 16 members of NATO and 6 of the Warsaw Pact at the time, which mandated comprehensive limits on several categories of conventional military equipment in Europe. Now, the treaty was signed in 1990 and ratified the next year after the dissolution of both the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union, which created gray areas that the Pentagon could exploit. And it has done so. And what we're seeing is that this past May, the first deployment of U.S. anti-ballistic missiles in Europe was achieved when a Patriot Advanced Capacity 3 missile battery and over 100 troops were moved into the Polish city of Murag near the Baltic Sea. September 17th of last year, U.S. President Barack Obama and Secretary of Defense Robert Gates announced the decision to shift from previous interceptor missile plans for Eastern Europe to the smarter, stronger, and swifter phased adaptive approach. We see that U.S. and NATO have claimed that moving military forces and equipment into Eastern Europe, several thousand U.S. troops to Bulgaria, Romania, and we see them continually doing this all throughout the Baltic region. We see Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland have been transformed into training grounds for the Pentagon's and NATO's wars abroad, especially in Afghanistan, and to prepare for potential confrontation and conflict with Russia. Now, we know that U.S. troops and warships and warplanes, they're all present in the region on a regular basis. They conduct military exercises several times a year. We have U.S. warships moving into the Black Sea many, many times during the year, having drills with Ukraine. And this is continuing because this is all in preparation for the upcoming war. Now, out in Turkey, we understand there was a false flag event. Turkey came out as soon as it happened. Erdogan said it was Syria, it was the Islamic State, and we're showing that maybe it wasn't really Syria or the Islamic State that actually did this bombing, but of course, Turkey is staying on that narrative. Now, since this happened, the Turkish land forces had fired nearly 500 times into Iraq and into Syria. Of course, they're going after the Islamic State. Now, of course, why would they do this? The Islamic State is part of their proxy army. They fund them, they clothe them, they house them, they treat them. So we know that they're not going after the Islamic State. They're hitting the infrastructure, they're hitting the troops in Syria to make it look like this is what they're doing. Now, the Turkish Prime Minister says his country's efforts to tackle the Islamic State is being obstructed by certain foreign powers. They're saying that Russia is guilty of protecting the Islamic State in Syria, which is complete and utterly ridiculous. Under the Syrian and Russian bombing efforts, the Islamic State has lost about 20 to 25% of their territory. The U.S., Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia have been airlifting the Islamic State out of the region. And Syria and Russia have liberated cities and towns like we've never seen before. While the United States, Turkey, France, Britain were all bombing inside of Syria trying to get the Islamic State increased its territory, increased military assets, increased in numbers. So again, whatever these governments are saying, it is always the opposite. Now, Russia has made an agreement with Damascus, and they agreed to deploy Russian combat air groups in Syria. The agreement concluded on August 26, 2015, stresses that the deployment of Russian combat aircraft is carried out at the request by the legitimate Syrian authorities to ensure peace and stability in the regions. Syria assumes responsibility for settling all claims that could be put forth by third parties as a result of damage caused by the activities of the Russian air group and its personnel. Now, we see another terror attack in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and there was an explosion there. They're saying there were 4 dead, and it was a suicide bomber which was involved. And very interestingly, Press Reset Earth put out a video showing that this explosion happened where nobody was. And on the screen above, and if you want to see this video, I have it on the X22Report.com site. Just go to the report, click on the title. It will bring you to the full report. And if you're on YouTube, you can see the video on YouTube. And what it shows is there was explosions on the screen the same time the explosions were occurring right outside the building. So this looks like a complete false flag. And we're starting to see a lot of these occur because we have to remember the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government. Their backs are against the wall. Russia is pushing them out of Syria, taking full control. The Iraqi forces have taken full control of their country, and they are pushing the Islamic State out. The United States, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia have been airlifting and protecting the Islamic State. So they need to gin up some type of an excuse of why they need to go into all of these countries. And we can see it has already started. Turkey needs the excuse to get into Syria and Iraq. And the United States, through the authorization for war, they need to get back into all of these countries to keep a puppet government in all of them. Now, the government employees and the corporate media, they are continually pushing the fear factor to its limit right now. And they're trying to get us all to believe that the Islamic State is coming for us. Now, we know what's really going to happen here. Our own governments here in the United States, Canada, Australia, European nations, UK, are going to create false flags to make us do something that we normally wouldn't really want to do, and that's go to war. And what we're hearing right now is the latest, that the Islamic State is developing deadly colorless and odorless chemical weapons which could cause mass casualties and total chaos when used by terrorists in attacking malls, sports stadiums in the West. Evidence of the poisonous chemicals, also called dirty bombs, was uncovered when Kurdish fighters had horrific burns and blisters on their skin and they were photographed. Well, that was from the chlorine gas and other chemical weapons that the Islamic State was using, which was supplied by Turkey, the United States, and other coalition forces. But what's very interesting about this, if you remember, Israel was testing dirty bombs in the desert. Now, we don't know the specifics of which kind of dirty bombs. Everyone believes when you hear a dirty bomb, it's a small little nuke type of weapon, but as we can see, dirty bombs could be chemical or biological. And they're trying to convince us that they'll have the ability to smuggle this into the country and use them inside the United States, the UK, Canada, anywhere they want. Now, we're also getting more fear-mongering from the government employees and the corporate media, where they're saying that the Islamic State might have the ability to weaponize algorithms, software specifically designed to manipulate stock markets and a stock market crash. Now, the effect of this is not only a loss of assets, but the creation of fear that will manifest in investors. It will prevent them from creating further investments, or they will make significant downgrades in the amounts they invest. This, in return, will have a serious impact on the economy. Even one as big as the U.S., it could still hurt the U.S. economy. Now, they're saying that this software is pretty easy to make, and it could be brought into the system, and all the algos would be tricked, and they can create this spark that would then push a crash in the market. Now, this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about how the government is going to explain away why this economy is crashing. And we talked about how they're going to use cyber attacks on the financial institutions and how they were going to use physical attacks around the country. And it seems that the government employees, the corporate media, is trying to push the idea that the Islamic State is ready to do this. And we know that this is being all created to make us think that it's an outside group or an outside country. But we know it's an internal false flag. And we know the economy is failing. And we know that they need to bring about war. They need to convince the people it's time to go to war. And this is why I've said many, many times before that this next event, the big one, the big explosion, is not going to be in one area. The big explosion is going to be in multiple sites. It's going to be physical. It's going to be a cyber attack. It's going to be attack on the financial institutions. We will see banks closing. We will see bail-ins. We will see riots in the street. They need all of this. They need to show that we are under attack. We need to go to war. And when the time is right, and believe me, we're getting closer, this will happen. They've been planning for this. They've been using propaganda to convince us of this is how it's going to happen. And they are getting ready to do it. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.